Hi, it's Liz Wallenstein, TMS therapist, mind body pain therapist, online and in person as well in Arizona. I'm so happy to hear that the podcast number 100 that I just did with Eddie recently for the Mind and Fitness podcast has been getting a lot of positive feedback. I've been hearing from some of you guys as well, and I'm just so happy that it resonated with so many of you and that you found it helpful. And I guess that's why I'm speaking today is Eddie contacted me with a question that he got from one of the listeners and invited me to come on and answer it, and I'm happy to do that. So I believe this person's name is Dawn. Dawn's question was, um, Liz talked about what she believes are the two things people can do when they find journaling and meditation, etc., doesn't seem to be working for them in terms of their recovery from pain. For an overthinker, and she wanted to know what are some examples of working on self-compassion and somatic attention. So I would say, talking about self-compassion first, one of the very common things that I see as a therapist in session with pain patients is, they'll tell me about, they'll be talking about themselves and they'll say, and I was telling myself, I know it's wrong. I know what I should do already. Like, why can't I just get this to go away? What am I doing wrong? Like, they sound really angry at themselves. And I think a lot of people who get this can often be one of their own harshest critics. And then I'll ask that client, I said, well, what if I'll pick somebody that is close to them, that they love, if it's a best friend, if it's a child, what if your best friend came to you and said the same exact thing about themselves, that their pain hasn't gone away yet, despite everything they've been doing? How would you respond to them? And a lot of times it'll sound different. They'll say, well, I'll tell them, it's going to happen. You just got to keep doing it. You're doing, you're working really hard. It's going to pay off. And then I'll ask them, why is it that somebody else you care about gets a different response than the response you give to yourself? You're so much more compassionate for them than you are for yourself. And that's one way of bringing it to their attention. And I'll also, another way that I might respond when I hear them say that is, I'm just thinking, this came up in a session yesterday, and I said to the person, it's not like you've been neglectful. Like, this is something you've lived with for quite some time. It's very hard to live with, and I've been hearing you try everything you can to get better. You do the mental work. You're in a therapy session for it. You did the reading. There's lots of people who just ignore their problems or distract themselves with like an addiction or something, but you're doing the work. So this doesn't really seem fair that you're like, it sounds like you're punishing yourself, like you're being really hard with yourself. And that I feel for them. I feel for them that that they're in so much pain, that it's been so long, that despite their efforts, there might be some progress, but not as much as they would like. Like, that's a really hard situation to be in. And sometimes when I take that compassionate role, and it's definitely sincere, I mean every word that I'm saying, it helps them to see things differently. It helps them to see how harsh and critical they're being with themselves, and that the alternative is just to be self-compassionate in terms of like, yeah, this has been really hard for me, and I have been trying really hard, and I am doing well, and maybe I am expecting too much too fast, and maybe I just need to keep staying the course, and I'm really almost there, and I'm doing a good job, and and I'll say, I hope you feel better soon. You're a good person. You don't deserve to be in pain, and they might be able to kind of adopt that for themselves. I often say, if you can replace your inner critic with the voice of grandma. And what I mean by that is, this really kind of warm figure, that figure who, hugs you and gives you warm chocolate chip cookies and is just, like, oh, doll, you're doing just fine. You're doing great. Like, if that's not your grandmother, well, then think of somebody else's who might be like that. But just to conjure up that kind of like really warm, sweet person in your mind, and what would they say about this thing that you're being really harsh with yourself about? So that's in terms of the self-compassion, and that's more of an immediate response. But something else that's, kind of separate but related, that's also good to do, is just in general, not even in the moment, to kind of to develop self-compassion, because I think a lot of people with this kind of pain disorder need it, is even if you just look online at or on the apps, like on meditation apps, if you put in self-compassion meditation, there are a bunch of those out there. Some of them are really good, really short and good. That's something that, not necessarily in the moment, but just in general, if you wanted it's a guided meditation to make a practice of listening to those, or just listen to it whenever you feel like it, or from time to time. It kind of helps put you in that place more often. So that's for self-compassion. And then in terms of the somatic work, also, two things. Basically, the goal, because the Dawn who asked the question talked about, targeted the overthinker. Basically, the goal is not to rely on your head so much, and to be able to use the information from your body, because your body kind of has a brain of its own as well, and combine the two. So, what you want to do is you want to develop what's called a felt sense. So, if you think of the expressions, my gut tells me, or in my heart I know, that's all kind of referring to that felt sense. So you want to look for what resonates with you. What is your intuition telling you? And you want to make sure that those things are being combined with what's going on in your head and what you're actually thinking about. So to check in with your gut in that way. And that's more like like overall a practice to try and get better at, to do that more automatically. But if you want to do something more in the moment as a response to pain, or as an exercise to get more in touch with your emotions, then you want to just, go inside, check in within your body, and search for a sensation. The sensation is usually very subtle. It could be a feeling in your chest, or in your stomach, or in your hands, your head. It could be a feeling behind the eyes. You just want to, don't rush yourself or put pressure. Sometimes it could take a little bit to find it, but find that sensation, and then just put your attention on that sensation. So, like if there's like a feeling behind the eyes, really just focus on that feeling. And then, this is kind of a meditative technique. So anyone who's kind of familiar with the meditation stuff might be familiar with this, but you just want to kind of poke around at it with curiosity. What's putting it there? What is it trying to tell you? But really just focusing on the sensation. And let's say like one behind the eyes might be a desire to cry. So what makes you want to cry? What do you want to cry out? What would you want to say as you're crying? What would you feel like is coming through your eyes? That's kind of like a very specific technique for getting in touch with your emotions, other than just like trying to think about it. Because again, the overthinkers kind of associate too much with their brains, and that's what we're trying to do, is get the body and the brain more in line and working collaboratively. So thanks so much, and I'm open to more questions. If Eddie is open to it as well, if you want to send to him, or you can always reach out to me through my website, lizwallensteintherapy.com, and be well.